You are now watching Zach Lesage, the best place to learn about competitive Pokemon TCG. Let's get it! Yo, what's poppin' YouTube? Welcome back to the channel, Zach Lesage here. Today we're going to be covering over Boltund VMAX. I've created a deck list surrounding this deck, and you want to know what? I've always been intrigued ever since Boltund V came back in Rebel Clash. That card was part of my Players Cup 2 winning deck, PTCGO, and I always felt like it could do a little bit more on its own, or maybe if it had the right kind of combination. This list is going to take that idea and try to push it as far as possible because Boltund VMAX has some of the same attacks that Boltund V had all the way back in Rebel Clash. So if you haven't already, give this video a like, subscribe to the channel already if you haven't, and let's jump into this deck list. So here's the list, and the basic idea of this deck is to accelerate as many lightning type energies in play as possible, and then hit as hard with either Boltund V's attack. You could use Bolt Storm on Boltund V if you're not able to get out the VMAX, and you could do a little bit more damage with Boltund VMAX. So you might be wondering what makes this deck viable considering Boltund V never really was viable on its own. There were some cases where it was like close to being viable, and we saw some turbo Boltund lists, things such as that, but really what breaks this deck? Well, let's start off at Boltund V. So Boltund V has always had the Electrify attack. That's why it saw play in PTCG decks. You can search your deck for 2 lightning energies and attach them to your bench Pokemon in any way you like. So you attach an energy to Boltund, they're likely not going to knock you out. You get 2 energies to your bench, and that allows you to kind of thin through the deck. And Bolt Storm does 10 plus 30 for each lightning energy that you have attached to all of your Pokemon. Very similar numbers to things that we'd see from Shadow Rider Calyrex, VMAX's Max Geist, and other attacks that kind of just pool the amount of energies or cards that you have in play. Now, the big kicker here is Boltund VMAX, and it's not for all the reasons that you might be thinking. It's a little bit different. So Bolt Storm does 30 plus 30. So you get a 20 extra damage buff, but the biggest thing that you're going to gain when you evolve from a Boltund V into a Boltund VMAX is going to be the HP buff. You're going to get an extra 120 HP, so you're able to survive those attacks. So now you're able to have extra turns to get those extra energies in play, and you can kind of pivot between a Boltund VMAX, a Boltund V, and a Boltund VMAX to give your opponent that kind of 3-2-3 8 prize card sandwich and be like, hey, you want to know what? If you can't really take the heat, if you can't really knock out all these Pokemon with boss's orders as effectively as you'd like, I'm going to force you to do extra damage, take extra turns out of your game, and put myself in a more advantageous position. We kind of wrap this deck together with Flaaffy from Evolving Skies. So its Dynamotor ability, we've seen success in the past with electric decks, and it's literally like a spiritual, almost exact reprint. Getting those energies back from your discard pile, you could totally pitch away some lightning energies with Quick Ball and with Professor's Research, and then power them up to your bench Pokemon. The Flaaffy line seems fine at a 4-4 just because of the amount of Rapid Strike Urshifu decks or Sylveon or anything else like that that I expect in this format. But I think it's one of those things where you're like, okay, you want to know what? We just have ways to power up energies. We have ways to do that. You have Crobat V for its Dark Asset ability to draw some extra cards if necessary. And I really like the Zekrom. I believe it's from Vivid Voltage. It's Wild Shock for a single prize card Pokemon. You could quickly power it up with Dynamotor, 130, and then it takes 60 damage to itself, and then you paralyze your opponent's active Pokemon. So considering there's not a lot of lightning decks that are seeing success nowadays, Zekrom is really one of those cards where it works in Flaaffy decks, it works here if you just need an extra turn to build up some energies for a Bolt Storm, or even if you're trying to go 130 and then go Max Bolt with Boltund VMAX, it's a 3 energy attack. There's a lot of cool things that you can do. The supporter line is very simple at 4 copies of Marnie, 4 copies of Professor's Research. These are just cards that you're going to be playing throughout the game to draw cards, whereas Professor's Research, it does have a little bit of an extra to it. You can use it to discard lightning energies for Flaaffy, so discarding cards is sometimes a good thing in a game of Pokemon as well, and Professor's Research allows you to get those energies discarded. Boss's Orders, of course, is going to be at a higher count at 3 because we want to be bringing up our opponent's Pokemon and knocking them out with our kind of boosted Bolt Storm attacks. Quick Ball, in the same way that Professor's Research is used to discard cards, is the only other way that you have to discard cards with this deck. So use your Quick Balls and Professor's Research as strategic as possible to discard Lightning Energies. Not Speed Lightning Energies, because Flaaffy cannot get those back. They only count as a Lightning Energy while attached in play. The Lightning Energies, the basic ones, you can get them back with Flaaffy. So that's the reason why we're trying to discard them. So keep in mind that we are just trying to get all the energies in play. When a Pokemon gets knocked out, factor that in when you're discarding extra energies, because you want to be able to have all the energies in play as much as possible. Level Ball works out great here because it can search out both Flaaffy and Mareep, and it's one of those cards where that's why it's at a slightly lesser count, the same way that the Evolution Incense is at a slightly lesser count than Quick Ball, because it can only search out Flaaffy and the Boltund VMAX. And in this deck, you don't really need the Evolution Incense as much as other decks, because Boltund V is very similar. You're going to be doing 20 less damage for its copy of Boltstorm. They both have the same attack, but obviously if you're in a position where you need that extra 20 damage or that extra HP, having those copies of Evolution Incense can be an absolute send. It's amazing. A couple copies of Switch and a few copies of Air Balloon. We would go with all Air Balloon, except Zekrom has a triple energy retreat cost, and you don't want to get trapped in the active spot. I don't necessarily think that's going to be a gigantic issue, but also if we run into something like another Zekrom that would paralyze one of our Pokemon, that's why you play copies of Switch. And before players are just like, you want to attack, there's not too many cards that like would paralyze me or anything. You got to look at other things and look deeper into the game, and that's why we really play a 3-2 Air Balloon Switch count. There's Umbreon V has an attack that can stop your Pokemon from retreating, so late game they might just be able to bring up a Flaaffy, stop it from retreating, and you're like, well, if I don't have Switch, I'm just gonna sit here. And when you sit there and do nothing in the late game, that allows your opponent to kind of orchestrate or tie together loose knots and create like this end game goal. So as much as it seems wild to be like, we're gonna put a couple copies of Switch, I've played Pokemon for over 15 years, and it's one of those things where Switch can save your butt big time. You definitely want to be prepared when it comes to things like Switch, just because you never know that you're going to hit this random deck, or this Pokemon has this attack that never gets used. And even with things like in our own deck, like Zekrom's Wild Shock, paralyzing your opponent's active Pokemon, it's really one of those things where we literally have one of those cards in our deck. It's quite possible someone else could have a copy of those cards in their deck as well. Switch also gives you also mobility options. So keep that in mind. I don't want to go over and be like, hey, I explained Switch for 2 minutes, but a lot of players have been asking me why I always include Switch, or why is it so important. That's really why, and that's really the next level play when it comes to deck building. Stormy Mountain seems to fit in here seamlessly, because you can search out all your Boltund V or Mareep. You always have a target for Electrify. You can always grab that Zekrom. You can fill up your bench really quickly, and it just seems like a good way for you to have some kind of counter stadium. I'm not entirely sure what kind of stadiums we're going to see in our kind of new format with Fusion Strike. I know that a lot of the Mew VMAX decks are just playing Old Cemetery. That could be annoying, especially since we're trying to attach energies. We attach energies from the discard pile and from the deck, but 20 damage here, 20 damage there certainly could add up. A late game Path to the Peak could stop a Crobat V. There's probably just some random stuff that we don't want to see, but that's why we have 3 copies of Stormy Mountains. I mean, maybe there's a world where playing 2 copies of Stormy Mountains is better, or maybe even 0 copies and just putting that towards extra Level Ball, extra Evolution Incense, and maybe even extra energy. And then here we are at the energy at the very end. I figured that 14 total was probably enough to hit with Boltstorm. On a Boltund VMAX, that's me accounting that maybe 3 of them get prized. If 3 of them get prized, that means that you have 11. 11 is 330 plus the base damage of 10 from Boltund, which is 340, and it does 360 with a Boltund VMAX. That seems to be enough to knock out most VMAX Pokemon in this metagame right now. I think the biggest ones would be around 340. I know that most are probably around 320, which means we can get away with a 10 count. So I felt like it was just an appropriate account, like just in terms of maybe your Speed Lightning energies got discarded off in early research, and then you only have 10 left. Like, it seemed like the proper count for a deck like this. And of course, Speed Lightning energy, when you attach it to one of your Lightning Pokemon, you get to draw 2 cards. which is just like a nice little consistency buff for a deck like this. I originally did not include them because I thought it would be better just to have access to Electrify and access to Dynamotor. But then I was like, you know what? Drawing extra cards is always kind of busted, always kind of broken. So that's really where we're at this deck. You're just building up a bunch of energies in play, and you are hitting as hard with Bolt Storm as possible, whether it's the Boltund V, Boltund VMAX, eventually trying to go into a Boltund VMAX, Boltund V, Boltund VMAX. You could throw a Zekrom in there for good measure if you're able to balance it, but when you're throwing prize cards at your opponent, you got to balance the amount of Pokemon that you're like throwing towards them, right? Don't make it easy for them to draw 6 prize cards. Put up that big fight, put up those Pokemon with big HP, and make sure that you're trying to properly force your opponent to take as many turns as possible. This deck would be great for a new player entering the game. It seems relatively simple, straightforward. The strategy seems like it could be effective. I mean, sure, yeah, you're going to lose to Rapid Strike Urshifu. It's going to be a tough matchup, but if you got enough energy set up, you might be able to get through it in general, or something like Zekrom can catch them off guard if they play a lower count of Switch and Escape Rope. So as long as you avoid fighting, I think this deck is a great choice. And I mean, there's still a few decks that are weak to lightning, such as Suicune-based decks. And I mean, you have an infinite damage cap, so you should be okay against most VMAX decks, kinda. So as we explore this Fusion Strike metagame, of course, once it launches on PTCGO, PTCG Live, and maybe I'll even do some tabletop play, I'll learn more about this deck and in the specific metagame, maybe make some changes as well. The list is in the description if you haven't got a chance to check it out, but feel free to check that out and maybe test it in real life or when PTCGO or PTCG Live comes out. Word. That's what we got going on for today's video, peeps. Hopefully you enjoyed Boltund VMAX. I'm getting really excited to start playing some Pokemon on PTCGO or PTCG Live. The news kind of came in that PTCGO will have Fusion Strike. I totally was not expecting that. I thought that Fusion Strike was going to be released with on PTCG Live, and that PTCGO was totally just going to head out that way. But you wonder what? We do get an extra chance to trade for some of the cards that we're looking for, so this might just be a little bit of a gentle hug from behind kind of gesture from the Pokemon company, where we're able to trade for all these awesome Fusion Strike cards. I mean, this is the biggest set of all time off the top of my head. I think it actually is the biggest set of all time just in general, so it's going to be nice to be able to trade for the cards that we want. Be sure to pick up some of the codes. If you are picking up any codes from the set, you can really help support me as a content creator by going to PTCGOstore.com and using code Lesage5. That would really I got a little bit of a kickback there, peeps, I'm not going to lie, so it'd be really awesome if you could use that code and help support me as a content creator. I mean, if we're getting codes anywhere, choose them. They're awesome, and it's instant email delivery as well. Their link is in the description, so check that out. That being said, I'm probably going to go create some more content. Today's Wednesday, and it's a content creation day for me. It's also a Bones Day if you follow Noodles to the Pug, so we got to make up for the no Bones days. So I'll catch up with everyone later. Peace out and have a great one. I truly appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch this video. It means the world to me. And my goal with this channel is to spread my love of the game and knowledge with our entire Pokemon TCG community. If you haven't already, help signal boost this video to other Pokemon TCG fans by liking it, sharing it with your friends, and subscribing to the channel. Hopefully we reach our goals really soon. Check out this recommended video and have yourself a great day. Thanks.